This is Dan Miller, Historical Solutions, LLC. I want to take just a few minutes to talk to you this afternoon. We're about to enter into what's going to be probably the most difficult month you've had as an American. And when I say that, I'm talking about as a member of the American community overall, not just a person or a few people or a section of the population, but as an American of a national community, the American community overall. The month of April 2020 is going to be the most difficult month in your lifetime. It seems to me that there's something to be gained, something to be learned, a certain footing to be had by going back into the American past and looking at other Aprils, in April, for something that you can gain in April 2020. I've done a little quick research. I've got 18 fast items. We could spend the rest of our afternoon on any one of them. We're not going to do that. But I just want to give you a 70,000 foot view, if you will, in April, so that you can grab onto some of these stories as we head into a challenging time, the April trials. 1775, before the nation is even in existence, in April, the very first abolitionist society is formed. And just a few days after that, Lexington and Concord, in the battle that occurs between, by and large, ordinary folks and the British Redcoats that starts the American Revolutionary War, that's in April. 8 more years of war will ensue, a lot of suffering, a lot of heartache, but out of that will come a new experiment in self-government, for better, for worse, one that needs to be improved over time, as we'll see. But in April, that happens. In April 1862, the Battle of Shiloh Church, more than 20,000 Americans killed in roughly 8 to 10 hours. 20,000 Americans killed in roughly 8 to 10 hours. All right. What we didn't know in April of 1862 was that there were going to be probably 10 more Shilohs in the future, in the next 3 years. In April 1862, slavery is abolished in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. You can call it the first surgery on the American body politic to remove the cancer that is slavery. In April. In April 1865, Abraham Lincoln is murdered in a time when it should have been peace on the horizon of the day. At the end of the day, there's a nation that's hanging by a thread. In April, because of his murder, will we teeter back into a state of war, of unnatural war, a guerrilla war, for months on end? In April, nobody knows the answer to that question. In April 1866, a year later, Congress passes the Civil Rights Act, and in many ways begins a second kind of war that will go on for years into the future. An undeclared war that will cause us great heartache and again great turmoil. In April of 1906, the earthquake in San Francisco occurs, rips apart one of the main cities on the West Coast, destroys one industry and launches many more. In April. In April 1917, as we've talked about before, the United States enters World War I, jumps into, formally part of a cataclysmic event that we're still climbing out of more than a century later. In April 1917. In April 1918 begins the first wave of influenza, the pandemic that'll kill 675,000 Americans in the course of about a year from the following April into 1919. In April. In April 1935, there are 20 things called the Black Blizzards that sweep across the American plains, the American West, and it's not snow that it's carrying, it's dirt and dust and all the rest. And it seems in April that the natural world has almost come to an end for the farmers in that part of the United States and for many other people dependent upon them. In April. In April 1942, 75,000 American and Filipino soldiers begin a march. They call it the Bataan Death March. in April. 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president for 12 years, a person that Americans have looked to lead them through Depression and into and out of World War II. He dies unexpectedly. He's replaced by a relatively unknown, untested, and frankly, some people think unprepared Vice President, now Harry Truman. In April, U.S. soldiers, American soldiers, liberate the concentration camp known as Buchenwald, where Dwight Eisenhower orders film crews in because he thinks nobody's going to believe the horrific sights that they've seen in April. In April 1948, on the verge of a new kind of conflict, one that's really never been engaged in before by Americans, it's called the Cold War, the Marshall Plan is announced. Now that's a great thing. That's a great thing. We know that looking back now, but at the time, it opened a door on an entirely unknown and frankly frightening chapter of American life. A formal involvement in rebuilding and in protecting Europe in April. In April 1968, Martin Luther King is murdered. And the Civil Rights Act of 1968 is passed in response. 39 cities across the United States, sections of which go up in flames as a result of King's death. We teeter on the verge again of some kind of slippage into some kind of conflict. It's not a war, but it's close to it. It's a kind of civil war, a racial civil war. We're thinking, we're fearing in April. In April 1975, the government of South Vietnam collapses. The Vietnam War comes crashing to a bloody, bloody end, and no one knows what's going to follow in international life in April. In April 1992, there are riots that rip out the heart of Los Angeles, California. They're in reaction to the verdict concerning Rodney King. And the entire nation kind of pivots into an inward look as to the state of racial relations and where are we headed in that April. 1995, Oklahoma City bombing in April. An entirely new era of, frankly, some fear, doubt, confusion, and again, the great unknown lying ahead in April of 1999, the Columbine killings. We're still coming out of that. We're still dealing with that from that April. And in April of 2010, there's a rumble and a roar on the floor of the Gulf of Mexico, and the Deepwater Horizon explodes, and oil flows and flows and flows. And there's an unbelievable natural disaster in April. I don't want to beat this to death. I just want you to realize that in April, coming up, you're going to be making history every day. We've done it before in April trials. I'm Dan Miller. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.